Many people spend years trying to attract things their nervous system does not yet feel safe enough to hold, not because they are incapable, not because they are unworthy, but because the body organizes around familiarity long before it organizes around possibility. This is why life can become confusing during periods of growth. Opportunities finally arrive, and suddenly exhaustion appears. Momentum builds, and part of you wants to disappear. Success comes closer, and anxiety quietly increases instead of relief. Many people experience this without understanding what is happening. They think they lack discipline. They think they are sabotaging themselves. They think something is wrong because they cannot relax even after achieving what they once wanted. But often the deeper issue is not desire. It is the capacity to hold. Because receiving more is not just psychological. It is profoundly physiological, rooted deep within the body. Visibility changes the nervous system. Responsibility changes the nervous system. Expansion changes the nervous system. And when the body does not yet feel safe with expansion, life can begin to feel overwhelming at the exact moment things start improving. This is why people so often collapse after periods of growth. Not because growth was wrong, but because their system could not yet remain present with the reality they were entering. The issue may not be that life is withholding from you. The issue may be that your nervous system is still learning how to safely hold what is trying to arrive. Capacity is a concept that is often misunderstood. Most people think that capacity simply means having more discipline, it means having more intelligence, it means having more ambition, and it means having more positive thinking. But capacity is not primarily mental. It is in fact deeply physiological. It is the nervous system's ability to remain regulated in contact with experience. Because the body does not respond to life the way the mind imagines it should. It responds according to what feels safe, sustainable, and survivable. This is why people can consciously desire something while unconsciously resisting it at the same time. Someone may deeply want success, but become overwhelmed the moment visibility increases. Someone may want love and connection, but begin withdrawing when intimacy becomes real. Someone may pursue financial expansion for years, then panic when larger opportunities finally arrive. The mind interprets this as self-sabotage, but often the nervous system is not sabotaging the future. It is the act of protecting familiarity, because familiarity feels safer than possibility. The nervous system was designed for survival, not expansion. It prioritizes predictability over potential. Known discomfort often feels safer than unknown freedom, and this creates invisible internal ceilings. People begin organizing their lives around what their system can emotionally regulate rather than what they consciously desire. This is why receiving more can feel strangely unsafe. More success inevitably means more visibility. More money inevitably means more responsibility. More love inevitably means more vulnerability. More freedom means less identity stability. Expansion, by its nature, naturally increases uncertainty, and uncertainty activates the protective mechanisms of the body, and so the system begins to contract, not because growth is wrong, but because the body is trying to maintain coherence. This is why tension reduces receiving. Urgency narrows our field of perception. Over-efforting consumes capacity. The more contracted the system becomes, the less available it is for contact with life itself. The body often rejects what the mind says it wants, not because the desire is false, but because the nervous system associates the consequences of that reality with overwhelm, instability, exposure, or loss of control. You can see this everywhere. People work endlessly because overworking gives the nervous system a sense of control over uncertainty. Creators disappear immediately after momentum builds because visibility activates emotional overload. Relationships collapse at the moment deeper closeness becomes possible because intimacy exceeds the system's current capacity for openness. Even burnout is often misunderstood. Many people are not exhausted from effort alone. They are exhausted from maintaining internal contraction for too long, from bracing against life while simultaneously trying to force life forward. And eventually the system begins resisting not because it lacks desire, but because it lacks safety. This changes far more than most people realize. Because capacity does not only shape how you feel internally, it shapes what can stabilize externally. Many people pursue achievement while remaining organized around pressure. They build their lives through urgency, self-monitoring, and constant internal tension. And for a while, this can produce results, but eventually success begins arriving with exhaustion attached to it. Growth destabilizes identity deeply. Rest becomes difficult, very difficult. Momentum requires increasing amounts of force to maintain. Success becomes something the nervous system survives, rather than something it can fully inhabit. This is why so many people reach goals they once wanted and still cannot relax. The external reality changed, but the internal organization remained the same. Money follows a similar pattern. People often think they simply want more money, but money amplifies everything already present in the nervous system. Visibility increases, responsibility increases, uncertainty increases, exposure increases, and if the body associates these experiences with danger, expansion immediately creates contraction. Opportunities arrive, and fear quietly rises beside them. More income comes in, and the system becomes hypervigilant. Momentum builds, and the person unconsciously creates conditions to reduce the intensity. Not because they do not want money, but because their nervous system cannot yet remain regulated in relationship with what money changes. The same thing happens in relationships. Intimacy requires openness, vulnerability, sustained emotional presence. But if closeness feels unsafe to the nervous system, the body begins protecting itself automatically. Distance appears, conflict appears, numbness appears, withdrawal appears. People often believe they are protecting themselves from another person. But many times they are protecting themselves from the intensity of being fully seen. Creativity and purpose follow the same structure. True expression requires uncertainty, visibility, exposure, and authenticity often threatens the identities people built for safety. Because living truthfully may require disappointing expectations, leaving familiar structures, or becoming visible in ways the nervous system has never learned to stabilize. So people suppress their deeper intelligence, not because it is absent, but because expressing it feels dangerous. This is why reality can begin feeling strangely repetitive. The same limitations appear in different forms. The same emotional patterns repeat beneath different circumstances. The same contractions quietly organize life again and again, and eventually a deeper realization begins to emerge. Reality is not only responding to what you want, it is responding to what your system can remain in relationship with. Not what you can briefly force, not what you can temporarily achieve through pressure, but what the body can sustainably remain open to without collapsing into protection. And this changes the entire orientation of growth. Life stops becoming a process of trying to get more from reality and becomes a process of becoming more available to reality itself. When this begins to become visible, the entire approach to growth starts to change. Because most people have been taught to expand life through force. Push harder, control more, think more positively, manage yourself more aggressively. But force can only override the nervous system for so long before the body begins resisting. And this is why so many people feel exhausted even while trying to heal, grow, succeed, or improve themselves. The same pressure that once organized survival often becomes the pressure they bring into transformation itself. But real expansion happens differently. Expansion happens when the nervous system becomes more capable of remaining open without collapse. Not perfectly open, not endlessly open, but increasingly able to stay present with life without immediately contracting into protection. This is why regulation matters more than force, because a regulated system can remain in contact longer. It can remain present with uncertainty longer, present with visibility longer, present with intimacy longer, present with opportunity longer. And over time, this changes reality itself, because perception changes when the body is no longer dominated by defense. You begin seeing differently, responding differently, interpreting differently. Possibilities that once felt threatening begin feeling accessible. Experiences that once triggered contraction begin feeling survivable. Life no longer needs to be tightly controlled in order for the system to remain coherent. And this is an important distinction. This is not about becoming passive. It is not about letting go in some abstract spiritual sense. And it is not another self-improvement technique. It is a different relationship with experience itself. A relationship built on increased honesty, reduced self-override, and the willingness to remain present slightly longer than the nervous system is accustomed to. Because many people spend their lives abandoning themselves the moment discomfort appears. They override exhaustion, override tension, override intuition, override emotional signals in order to maintain performance, certainty, or identity. But the body keeps the record of that self-abandonment, and eventually the system begins protecting itself from further override by creating resistance, exhaustion, confusion, numbness, or collapse. Not as punishment, but as preservation. What arrives in your life is deeply connected to what your nervous system can safely sustain. Expansion is not acquiring more, it is becoming less organized around contraction. Capacity changes reality because perception changes reality, and the body must feel safe enough to stop defending against life. Because when defense softens, something else becomes possible. Life no longer feels like something you must constantly force into existence. You become more available to participate in it. So perhaps for a moment, there is nothing to solve, nothing to force, nothing to become immediately, only something to notice. Where in your life do you override yourself in order to maintain momentum? Where do you continue pushing not because it feels aligned, but because slowing down feels unsafe? What experiences feel emotionally difficult to fully receive? Not intellectually receive, but physiologically receive. Rest, support, visibility, love, ease, success. What if part of the difficulty is not that these things are unavailable, but that your system has not yet learned they are safe to remain connected to? And what if exhaustion is not weakness? What if it is overload? What if the body is not failing you, but protecting you from realities it does not yet know how to stabilize? Many people spend years trying to force themselves beyond their limits without ever asking whether contraction itself has become the organizing structure of their life. But healing is not simply learning how to push harder without breaking. Sometimes healing is allowing the nervous system to discover that life no longer has to be survived in the same way. That presence may be safer than control. That openness may be safer than constant defense. That uncertainty may not actually be danger, and slowly, capacity begins to change, not through force, not through performance, but through increasing contact with life without immediately collapsing away from it. Perhaps life is not asking you to force more into existence. Perhaps it is asking you to become more available to what is already trying to arrive. Because what changes your life may not be greater effort, but greater capacity to remain open without contraction.